r/AskReddit by Redmond ETS. What's the most disgusting thing you've found in someone else's home? Mentally impaired girl kept in a 6th floor attic room with cats that had given birth on her bed that was never cleaned and also covered in cat vomit. The room was filled with containers of moldy urine and feces. Her room was hidden behind a curtain and a fake wall. There was a TV, a light, and a bed. Power was run through the drywall with lamp wire. I was a cable guy at that time. I apparently accidentally found her room on an install. I walked back to my truck, cried, and called services. I used to work for a man who owned 100 plus mobile homes as a handyman helper. I was fresh out of high school and had electrical experience. We went to one house people had recently moved out of, and when you opened the door to go in you were pushing roaches out the way. Literally every square inch of the house was covered in roaches and the people had only left a week prior. My boss told us not to go in and eventually he just burnt it down instead of dealing with it. My husband and I were apartment hunting. Went with the property management rep to look at a place. Walked in and the previous tenant was lying dead in the kitchen. Didn't rent the place. A herd of dead deer in a flooded and finished basement. Coagulated deer soup 2 feet deep mixed with heating oil and the full length of the house. Someone tried to live upstairs, and I was there to disconnect services. Very late, but I used to work for a moving company. One time we were doing the walkthrough and the other guy with me wanted to test the weight of the couch. So we briefly lifted it up. Before we fully set it back down, the lady asked us to pick it up again. We did. She leaned under and, with her bare hand, grabbed a dead rat. Then held onto the rat and used it to point to all the different furniture items we would be moving for her. I couldn't believe it. I used to do furnace and duct cleaning for a few years, so I've seen some pretty nasty stuff. While going through this one kid's room, I noticed his air return on the floor, so I popped the vent cover and saw that he'd been storing a bunch of stuff in there, like textbooks and bags of garbage. Not the weirdest things in the world, but it still shouldn't be in there. He's laying on his bed studying, so I ask him to take the stuff out of the vent for me because he is a teenager and I don't want to stumble on his stash or something. I return to his room a short while later and most of the stuff is out, but I notice one more bag of garbage in an old white grocery bag and plastic wrapper. I reach down into the vent and grab onto the plastic wrapper, but it was actually being used for something. I grab hold to something squishy and pull it out, confused until it hits the sunlight. I'm kneeling down holding up this teenager's clear fleshlight like King Arthur just pulled out Excalibur. I'm going to call it Veronica. My assistant and I lock eyes in anguish as I let go of the well-used and still greasy Veronica. It was kind of like when a dude gets hit in the nuts and another guy watching it can feel it indirectly. He may as well have palmed it himself. Veronica tumbles down in slow motion and bounces off the floor, releasing last use's fluids onto the carpet, then rolls back into the vent. With the teenager still on the bed studying, not noticing what just happened, I excused myself and immediately washed my hands and sanitized them with our furnace cleaner. I re-enter the room with a pair of gloves and remove the bag of garbage from the vent, while Veronica stares up at me laughing, knowing what was in store next. The garbage bag was filled with wads of toilet paper, covered in what looked like blood and semen. The kid was storing it in the air return, the place where your air gets recycled and sent through the furnace. Everyone was breathing that in unknowingly throughout the whole house. We threw it in one of our garbage bags and didn't speak a word of it. That little bastard knew she was in there, and that makes it more even disgusting. She's not something you just forget about. Wore gloves 100% of the time after that. Not a home, but I used to work at a mom and pop computer shop and stumbled across an old guy's stash of CP on his computer. Reported it to police. They came and looked. I had to show them where. They arrested him on pickup. Turned out he wasn't a collector, he was a creator, and the kids were family members and close friends. Messed me up for months and all I saw was thumbnails, but that was enough. Found out a couple years later he was connected to a ring of creators and a forum trading this stuff. Between the guy I busted and about 11 other guys they caught, they got some of them to flip and they managed to get most of the ring and did a massive takedown in several countries with like 100 arrests. During my mobile therapist days in Pittsburgh, I visited my adolescent client's home in a low-income neighborhood. Since there wasn't sufficient seating, I sat on the floor. While I did the psychosocial assessment, I began feeling micro-sensations on both legs. Initially, I was able to ignore it, but it became so intense I looked at my legs. There was an army of roaches crawling on both legs. Addressed landlord responsibility and encouraged the parent to contact fair housing. Number provided. My sister didn't take care of her cat. She locked him outside of the room in the dark and never cleaned his box. As a result, the outside would be covered in random litter piles with crap everywhere. Piss-soaked couch because his box was so filthy. Smell was awful. Worms were all inside the crap. Flies and roaches too. She was disgusting and abusive and expected me to clean it. Her belongings piled everywhere in boxes. Don't worry, I rescued the cat. But it was vile. Helping my in-laws hang curtains on the window at the back of the lounge room. Moved my father-in-law's recliner out of the way. Next to where his chair had been, found a quite literally inch-plus high pile of his chewed-off fingernails, probably about 4 to 6 inches diameter. They'd lived there for about 4 years. Turned out in the evening when he was watching his 3 hours of news broadcasts across 4 different channels, he would bite at his fingernails and then just flick them over the armrest where presumably, to him, they just disappeared into the abyss. When they were found, I just looked at him, he looked at me, and then said, "Mother-in-law really doesn't clean well, does she?" Not a home, but I was cleaning a dorm rooms once, and I pulled moldy underwear out of a mini fridge. A girl's internet search history. I was there to work on her PC. I was not snooping or anything seedy. But there was horse stuff. There were horse posters on the walls. I didn't personally find it, but I worked at a group home for traumatic brain injuries, and one of the staff found 50+ used tampons under one of the residents' beds. He would occasionally dress as a woman, and it was worked out with the facility that on those days he was allowed to use the women's bathroom, and apparently he was stealing them out of the trash. They had to stop letting him after that. Went to a girl's apartment to hang out. She seemed normal, but when we went to her room I saw that she didn't have any sheets on her bed, just a bare mattress and a comforter. The disgusting thing was the menstrual stains that covered the entire middle of the mattress in a big sanguine oval. She just slept that way every night like it was normal. Either an elderly man that had died in bed, and I found him a few days after when I came to work on his apartment, or someone abandoned their rented apartment. They had lost their cat and stored it in their freezer. Suffice to say, the power had been disconnected for lack of payment. The inside of the fridge freezer was loaded with bugs. Like, you could not see a square inch of the fridge shelving or interior sides. It was just bugs writhing. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.